I'm Jessica Miller, and I'm about to tell you the most unbelievable story of betrayal, identity theft, and revenge that you've probably ever heard. For 2 years, I welcomed my brother's girlfriend Amanda into our family with open arms, treating her like the sister I never had. I shared my financial advice, helped her build her credit, and even let her stay at my apartment whenever she needed space. What I didn't know was that she was systematically studying every detail of my financial life, memorizing my personal information, and planning the most devastating betrayal imaginable. When Amanda got engaged to my brother Ryan, she decided to fund her dream $75,000 wedding by stealing my identity and destroying my credit in the process. She opened 7 different credit cards in my name, charged luxury wedding vendors across Phoenix, and had everything delivered to her address while I remained completely oblivious. Amanda thought she had executed the perfect crime, but what she didn't realize was that I had been documenting our relationship from the beginning, and when I discovered what she'd done, I didn't just expose her fraud. I made sure every single vendor, every guest, and every person in her wedding party knew exactly who Amanda Thompson really was. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up in Phoenix, Arizona, I always prided myself on being the responsible one in the Miller family. While my friends were maxing out credit cards in college and living paycheck to paycheck, I was the girl who read financial blogs for fun and actually understood what compound interest meant. My parents, Carol and David, used to joke that I was born with a calculator in my hand instead of a silver spoon in my mouth, but honestly, I took that as a compliment. By the time I turned 28, I had built something I was genuinely proud of: a credit score of 780, an emergency fund that could cover 6 months of expenses, and a thriving career as a graphic designer at Phoenix Creative Studio in downtown Tempe. My apartment in Tempe wasn't fancy by Scottsdale standards, but it was mine. I had saved every penny to furnish it exactly the way I wanted, with clean lines, plants in every corner, and a home office setup that any freelancer would envy. The walls were covered with designs I'd created for local businesses, from craft, breweries in Old Town to boutique shops in Central Phoenix. My colleagues respected my work, my clients trusted my creative vision, and my financial advisor always used me as an example of how someone in their 20s should handle money. I wasn't rich, but I was stable, secure, and proud of the foundation I'd built for my future. The Miller family had always been close, which made my brother Ryan's happiness feel like my own happiness. When he started dating Amanda Thompson about 2 years ago, I was genuinely excited about the possibility of finally having a sister. Ryan had dated plenty of girls throughout college and his early 20s, but none of them had ever felt like family material. Amanda was different from the start. She was sweet, down to earth, and seemed genuinely interested in becoming part of our family rather than just dating my brother. She'd show up to family dinners with homemade desserts, remember everyone's birthdays, and always offer to help my mom with the dishes afterward. What I appreciated most about Amanda was how much she seemed to value my opinion and advice. During their first few months of dating, she'd text me separately from Ryan, asking questions about everything from career decisions to apartment hunting. When she got promoted from sales associate to assistant manager at the department store where she worked, she called me before she even called Ryan to share the good news. When she was struggling with whether to lease or buy a car, she came over to my apartment with a notebook full of questions, and we spent an entire evening going through the pros and cons of different financing options. Amanda would often compliment my apartment, my financial planning skills, and what she called my put-together lifestyle. She'd run her fingers along my granite countertops and say things like, "I can't wait until I can afford a place like this," or "You're so lucky to have your finances figured out at our age." At first, I found her admiration flattering. It felt good to be seen as someone who had her life together, especially by someone who was becoming an important part of my family. I started looking forward to our coffee dates in Old Town Scottsdale, our shopping trips to the outlets, and the evenings when she'd come over to my place to hang out while Ryan was working late. Amanda had this way of making me feel like a mentor and a friend at the same time. She'd ask me about my credit cards, but framed it as wanting to understand how to build good credit herself. She'd inquire about my bank and which accounts I recommended, saying she was thinking about switching from her credit union to something more established. When she started staying over at my apartment occasionally, usually after minor arguments with Ryan, she'd help me organize my home office and even offered to help me pay bills online, claiming she wanted to learn my system for staying on top of finances. Looking back now, I can see how calculated every question was, but at the time, it just felt like the normal curiosity of a young woman who wanted to improve her financial situation. Amanda had grown up in a family that didn't talk about money, management, and she'd made some poor financial decisions in her early 20s that she seemed genuinely committed to correcting. She'd often say things like, "I wish I had learned this stuff when I was younger like you did," or, "My family never taught me any of this." I felt proud to be the person helping her build a better financial future. Our relationship deepened over the months as Amanda became more integrated into the Miller family traditions. She joined us for our annual camping trip to Sedona, came to my parents' house for Sunday dinners, and even helped me move to a slightly larger apartment in a better part of Tempe when my lease expired. During that move, Amanda was incredibly helpful, packing boxes, coordinating with the movers, and even offering to handle some of the utility transfers while I was dealing with work deadlines. She seemed to take genuine pleasure in helping me get organized in my new space, and I was grateful to have someone I could rely on during a stressful time. Amanda's interest in my financial life seemed to intensify after she and Ryan hit their 1-year mark. She'd ask more detailed questions about investment strategies, retirement planning, and how I'd managed to build such good credit so young. She'd bring up conversations about our future goals, talking about how she wanted to be able to afford a nice wedding someday and buy a house in a good neighborhood. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I encouraged these ambitions and even helped her create a budget that would allow her to start saving more aggressively. We'd spend entire afternoons at my dining room table, going through her expenses line by line, figuring out where she could cut back and how much she could realistically save each month. The more time we spent together, the more Amanda felt like the sister I'd always wanted. She'd call me when she was having a bad day at work, come over to watch movies when Ryan was out of town, and even started joining me for my regular Saturday morning hikes in South Mountain Park. She had this way of making me feel valued and appreciated that I hadn't experienced before in a family relationship. My parents had always been loving but practical, and Ryan and I had a typical sibling relationship with plenty of teasing and competition. Amanda's gratitude and admiration felt different, more intentional and meaningful. During the second year of her relationship with Ryan, Amanda started talking more seriously about their future together. She'd hint about hoping for an engagement, show me Pinterest boards of wedding dresses and venue ideas, and ask my opinion about different aspects of wedding planning. I found myself getting caught up in her excitement, helping her research photographers and florists around Phoenix, even though no proposal had happened yet. She'd say things like, "When Ryan and I get married, I want you to be my maid of honor," or, "I hope our kids will be as smart with money as their Aunt Jessica." Amanda's dreams for her future wedding were elaborate and expensive. She'd show me pictures of receptions at Desert Ridge Country Club, one of the most exclusive venues in Scottsdale, and talk about having a photographer whose work she'd seen in Arizona wedding magazines. When I'd gently suggest that those kinds of vendors might be outside her budget, even with serious saving, she'd wave off my concerns and say she was confident everything would work out. She seemed to have unwavering faith that she'd find a way to afford the wedding of her dreams, though she was never specific about how that would happen. The engagement finally came last Christmas during a romantic getaway to Flagstaff that Ryan had planned. Amanda called me from their hotel room, crying happy tears and barely able to speak coherently about the proposal. When they returned to Phoenix, she was glowing with happiness, and immediately threw herself into wedding planning with an energy and enthusiasm that was infectious. She'd already researched venues extensively during their relationship, and within a week of getting engaged, she'd scheduled tours at 3 different locations around the valley. What surprised me most about Amanda's approach to wedding planning was how quickly she seemed to move from dreaming to actually booking vendors. Within a month of the engagement, she'd put down deposits on Desert Ridge Country Club, secured a photographer whose packages started at $8,000, and ordered a wedding dress from a boutique in Central Phoenix that specialized in designer gowns. When I asked how she was managing to move so quickly on such expensive choices, Amanda would just smile and say she'd been really smart with her savings and had some family money she hadn't mentioned before. The pace of Amanda's wedding planning accelerated throughout the spring. Every time we talked, she'd have booked another vendor or upgraded another aspect of the celebration. She'd hired a florist who specialized in elaborate centerpieces with imported flowers, chosen a caterer known for gourmet menus that cost well over $100 per person, and even booked a string quartet for the ceremony. The wedding was shaping up to be an incredibly elegant and expensive affair, far beyond what I would have expected based on Amanda's retail salary and Ryan's income as a project manager for a construction company. When I'd express concern about the mounting costs, Amanda would reassure me that everything was under control. She'd say things like, "I've been planning this for years and saving accordingly," or "My credit is actually really good now, thanks to everything you taught me." She seemed confident and relaxed about the financial aspects of the wedding, which should have put my concerns to rest, but something about her explanations never quite added up. Her job at the department store paid reasonably well for retail, but not well enough to support the kind of wedding she was planning without significant debt or financial help. Amanda's spending extended beyond just the wedding itself. She'd started shopping for what she called her engagement wardrobe, buying expensive outfits for the various parties and events leading up to the wedding. She'd take weekend trips to Sedona and Tucson to look at venues and meet with vendors, staying at nice hotels and eating at upscale restaurants. She'd joined an expensive gym to get in shape for the wedding and started getting regular facials and massages at a spa in Scottsdale. Her lifestyle had upgraded dramatically since the engagement, but she never seemed stressed about money or concerned about overspending. The bridal shower Amanda planned for herself was particularly extravagant. She'd rented a private dining room at one of Scottsdale's trendiest restaurants, hired a professional event coordinator, and sent out beautiful, printed invitations to 40 women from both families and her various friend groups. The decorations were stunning, the food was restaurant quality, and she'd even arranged for a photographer to capture every moment. When the bills for events like these would have normally caused stress for someone in Amanda's financial situation, she seemed completely unfazed. Throughout this entire period, Amanda continued to be affectionate and grateful toward me. She'd frequently tell Ryan how lucky he was to have such a smart sister, and she'd often credit me with helping her become more financially responsible. She'd bring me small gifts from her wedding planning trips, ask for my opinion on various decisions, and include me in all the important moments of the engagement period. I felt closer to her than ever, proud of the role I'd played in helping her build the confidence to plan such an ambitious celebration. The red flags that I should have noticed were subtle, but persistent. Amanda would still ask detailed questions about my financial life, but now she framed them as wanting to emulate my success in her married life. She'd ask about my credit cards, but said she was researching which ones to apply for as a married couple. She'd inquire about my bank accounts and investment strategies, claiming she wanted to set up similar systems for herself and Ryan. Her curiosity felt natural given our relationship and her stated goals, so I continued to share information openly and honestly. Amanda's access to my personal information had grown over the 2 years of our relationship in ways that felt completely normal at the time. She knew my mother's maiden name because she'd been to family gatherings where old stories were shared. She knew the name of my first pet because I had photos of my childhood dog around my apartment and had told her stories about growing up with him. She knew where I'd gone to high school because she'd driven past it with me and asked about my experiences there. All of this information had been shared naturally in the context of building a close relationship, not because she'd asked invasive questions or pushed for details. The most dangerous aspect of Amanda's access to my information was how much time she'd spent in my apartment and around my personal belongings. She'd been there when I was paying bills online, had seen me enter passwords and account information, and had even helped me organize my home office filing system. She'd borrowed my laptop occasionally to check her email or research wedding vendors, and I'd never thought twice about it. She'd offered to help with tasks like organizing my mail or filing important documents, and I'd been grateful for the assistance during busy periods at work. As Amanda's wedding planning reached its peak in the late spring, I started to notice some changes in her behavior that seemed odd, but not necessarily concerning. She'd become more secretive about certain aspects of the planning, saying she wanted to surprise Ryan with some of the details. She'd started having vendor meetings and appointments that she'd attend alone, claiming she wanted to handle certain decisions independently. She'd also become less interested in my financial advice, saying she felt confident enough now to manage things on her own. The first real warning sign came when Amanda started having mail delivered to her apartment that seemed unusual for someone planning a wedding. I'd noticed when I visited that she was receiving a lot of packages and envelopes that she'd quickly put away without opening while I was there. When I'd ask about them, she'd say they were wedding-related supplies or vendor contracts that she preferred to review privately. She'd also started being more protective of her phone and laptop, keeping them closer to her and seeming nervous when notifications would come in while we were together. Despite these small red flags, I had no reason to suspect that anything was seriously wrong. Amanda seemed happy, the wedding planning was progressing smoothly, and Ryan was thrilled with how everything was coming together. The celebration was set for late summer at Desert Ridge Country Club, with nearly 200 guests expected to attend. The venue was gorgeous. The vendors were all highly regarded professionals, and Amanda seemed to have created exactly the elegant, romantic wedding she'd been dreaming about since she was young. My own life was continuing to go well during this period. My work at Phoenix Creative Studio was thriving, with several major clients trusting me with important branding projects. I'd been featured in a local business magazine as one of Phoenix's rising young entrepreneurs, and I was even considering branching out on my own as a freelancer within the next year. My financial situation remained stable and strong, with my credit score actually improving slightly as I'd continued to manage my accounts responsibly and pay down my remaining student loans ahead of schedule. The contrast between my financial stability and what I assumed was Amanda's growing debt from wedding planning had started to concern me slightly. I'd tried a few times to have gentle conversations with her about whether she was taking on too much financial stress for the wedding, but she'd always reassure me that everything was manageable. She'd say things like, "I know what I'm doing. Now, thanks to everything you taught me," or "I've got this all figured out." Her confidence was reassuring, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something about her financial situation didn't quite add up. What I didn't know was that Amanda had spent the past year systematically stealing my identity to fund her entire wedding fantasy. While I was sleeping peacefully in my apartment, confident in my financial security and proud of the sisterly relationship we'd built, Amanda was using my personal information to open credit card after credit card in my name. She'd been having the cards delivered to her address, using them to pay for every aspect of her elaborate wedding, and building up tens of thousands of dollars in debt that would eventually destroy my credit and devastate my financial future. The perfect storm was about to hit, and I had absolutely no idea what was coming. My reputation at Phoenix Creative Studio had been built over 4 years of consistent excellence and ethical business practices. When I first started there as a junior designer fresh out of Arizona State University, I made a promise to myself that I would never cut corners or compromise my integrity for quick success. That philosophy had served me well in an industry where many young designers burned out quickly or got caught up in office politics. My colleagues knew they could count on me to meet deadlines, stay within budget constraints, and handle client relationships with professionalism and genuine care. The creative world in Phoenix was smaller than people might expect, and word traveled fast about designers who were reliable versus those who overpromised and underdelivered. I had cultivated relationships with local business owners across the valley, from small startups in Tempe to established companies in Paradise Valley. My client base included everything from craft breweries and boutique fitness studios to medical practices and law firms. Each project was different, but they all shared one common thread. Clients trusted me to understand their vision and bring it to life within their budget and timeline. Working at Phoenix Creative Studio also meant being part of a tight-knit team of creative professionals who supported each other's growth and success. My supervisor, Maria Santos, had become not just a boss, but a mentor who encouraged me to take on increasingly challenging projects and develop my skills in areas like brand strategy and client consultation. The studio's collaborative environment meant that we often worked together on larger campaigns, and I had learned as much from my colleagues as I had from formal training or online courses. My personal workspace at the studio reflected my organized approach to both creativity and business. My desk was always clean and efficiently arranged, with project files sorted by deadline and client priority. I kept detailed notes about every client interaction, maintained comprehensive project timelines, and used a color-coded system for tracking different phases of each design process. My colleagues would often joke that I could run my own agency with the systems I had developed, and honestly, that possibility had started to feel more realistic as my client relationships deepened, and my reputation in the Phoenix design community continued to grow. The financial discipline that I applied to my personal life extended seamlessly into my professional approach. I tracked every business expense, maintained detailed records for tax purposes, and had even started setting aside money each month toward the eventual goal of starting my own design consultancy. My accountant, who also handled taxes for several other young professionals in Phoenix, had commented multiple times on how well organized my financial records were compared to most people in creative fields. This attention to detail and commitment to financial responsibility had been ingrained in me from childhood. My parents, Carol and David, had both worked in education, Mom as an elementary school teacher and Dad as a high school counselor, which meant our family had always lived comfortably but modestly. They had taught me early that money was a tool for creating security and opportunities, not something to be spent impulsively or taken for granted. Growing up, I had watched them save diligently for family vacations, plan carefully for major purchases, and always maintain an emergency fund for unexpected expenses. The Miller family approach to money wasn't about deprivation or excessive frugality. It was about making conscious choices and understanding the long-term consequences of financial decisions. When I wanted a car in high school, my parents helped me research reliable used models and taught me how to compare financing options. When I was choosing a college major, they encouraged me to consider both my passions and the practical realities of earning potential in different fields. Their guidance had shaped my understanding that financial security created freedom rather than limiting it. My apartment in Tempe was a perfect reflection of this balanced approach to money and lifestyle. Rather than stretching my budget to live in a trendy area like Old Town Scottsdale, I had chosen a well-maintained complex in a safe neighborhood where I could comfortably afford the rent while still saving a significant portion of my income. The unit itself was a one-bedroom with an open floor plan that I had furnished gradually with pieces that were both functional and beautiful. Every purchase had been researched and considered, from the comfortable sectional sofa where I spent evenings reading and watching movies to the adjustable height desk where I sometimes worked on freelance projects. The home office setup in my apartment had become something of a showcase for how a young professional could create an efficient workspace without spending a fortune. I had invested in a high-quality ergonomic chair and a large monitor that reduced eye strain during long design sessions, but I had found both items during end-of-year sales and had researched extensively before making the purchases. My filing system was simple but comprehensive. with clearly labeled folders for different categories of important documents: tax records, insurance policies, bank statements, and investment accounts. Technology played a crucial role in maintaining my organized approach to both work and personal finances. I used budgeting software that automatically categorized my expenses and sent me monthly reports on my spending patterns. My banking app allowed me to set up automatic transfers to different savings goals, and I had created separate sub-accounts for things like vacation funds, emergency expenses, and future business investments. These systems had become so routine that managing my finances felt effortless rather than burdensome. The social aspect of my life in Phoenix was equally well balanced and carefully cultivated. I had maintained close friendships from college while also building new relationships through work and community activities. My friend group included other young professionals who shared similar values about work-life balance and financial responsibility. We enjoyed exploring Phoenix's growing food scene, hiking in the surrounding mountains, and attending cultural events around the valley. But we were all mindful about spending and often chose activities that were engaging without being expensive. My relationship with my family had only grown stronger as I had established myself as an independent adult. Sunday dinners at my parents' house in Central Phoenix had become a weekly tradition that I genuinely looked forward to. These gatherings were often the highlight of my week, providing a chance to catch up with Mom and Dad, share stories about work and life, and maintain the close bonds that had always been important to our family. When Ryan started bringing Amanda to these dinners, it felt natural and wonderful to expand our family circle. The role I had taken on as the family's informal financial advisor had developed organically over the years. My parents would ask for my opinion on major purchases or investment decisions, not because they couldn't figure things out themselves, but because they valued my perspective and trusted my research skills. Ryan had come to me for advice when he was buying his first house, and I had helped him understand different mortgage options and negotiate with lenders. When family friends or extended relatives had questions about credit scores or budgeting strategies, I was often the person they turned to for guidance. This reputation for financial wisdom had extended beyond my immediate family into my broader social and professional networks. Colleagues at the studio would ask for recommendations about everything from insurance providers to investment advisors. Friends would seek my input on major financial decisions like whether to lease or buy a car, how to tackle student loan debt, or what to look for in a first-time home purchase. I enjoyed these conversations and took pride in being able to help people make more informed decisions about their money. The confidence I had built in my financial planning abilities had also influenced my career aspirations and long-term goals. I had started to envision a future where I could combine my creative skills with my understanding of business and finance, perhaps by starting my own design consultancy that specialized in working with small businesses and entrepreneurs. This vision had motivated me to take on additional responsibilities at Phoenix Creative Studio, volunteer for projects that expanded my skill set, and begin building the financial foundation that would eventually allow me to take the risk of going out on my own. My credit score of 780 was something I genuinely took pride in, not because I was obsessed with numbers, but because it represented years of responsible decisions and careful planning. I had built that score by consistently paying bills on time, keeping my credit utilization low, and avoiding unnecessary debt. The few credit cards I carried were used strategically for things like business expenses that I paid off immediately, and I monitored my credit report regularly to ensure that everything was accurate and up to date. The emergency fund I had built represented another source of security and pride. It had taken me 3 years to accumulate 6 months' worth of living expenses, but reaching that goal had given me a confidence and peace of mind that influenced every other aspect of my life. Knowing that I could handle an unexpected job loss, medical emergency, or major car repair without going into debt or asking my family for help had allowed me to take creative risks in my career and enjoy my day-to-day life without constant financial anxiety. This foundation of financial security and professional success had also influenced my approach to relationships and family life. I felt ready to be generous with my time and energy because I wasn't constantly worried about my own stability. When Amanda started dating Ryan and began asking for financial advice, I was genuinely happy to share what I had learned and help her build a more secure future. The satisfaction I got from mentoring her felt like a natural extension of the values my parents had instilled in me about helping others and contributing to my community. The lifestyle I had created in Phoenix felt sustainable and fulfilling in ways that went beyond just financial success. I loved the work I was doing, enjoyed the relationships I had built, and felt optimistic about my future prospects, both personally and professionally. My apartment was a space where I could relax and recharge after busy days at the studio. My friendships provided emotional support and fun adventures around the valley. My family relationships gave me a sense of belonging and continuity that grounded me even during stressful periods at work. Looking back now, I can see how this foundation of stability and success had made me an ideal target for someone like Amanda. I had built exactly the kind of financial profile that would be attractive to someone planning an elaborate fraud scheme. My excellent credit, my organized approach to personal information, and my trusting nature within family relationships created the perfect conditions for the betrayal that was coming. But at the time, all I could see was how blessed I felt to have created such a solid foundation for my adult life, and how excited I was to share that knowledge and stability with someone who was becoming an important part of my family. The first time Ryan brought Amanda to meet our family was during a casual barbecue at my parents' house on a warm Sunday afternoon in March. I remember being struck by how naturally she seemed to fit into our family dynamic, asking thoughtful questions about Mom's garden, complimenting Dad on his grilling technique, and genuinely listening when people shared stories or opinions. Many of Ryan's previous girlfriends had seemed either intimidated by our close family relationships or dismissive of our traditions, but Amanda appeared to genuinely enjoy being included in our conversations and activities. What impressed me most about Amanda that first day was how she handled the gentle teasing and questioning that naturally came with meeting a new family. When Dad started asking about her background and career goals in his friendly but thorough counselor way, she answered honestly and thoughtfully without seeming defensive or overwhelmed. When Mom started showing her photo albums and telling embarrassing stories about Ryan's childhood, Amanda laughed genuinely and asked follow-up questions that showed she was really paying attention. By the end of the afternoon, she felt less like a stranger who was being evaluated and more like someone who belonged at our family table. The relationship between Amanda and me developed gradually over the following months, through a series of small, natural interactions that built trust and affection on both sides. She would text me occasionally to ask for recommendations about everything from hair salons in Phoenix to reliable auto repair shops. When she was having trouble with a difficult coworker at the department store where she worked, she called me for advice about how to handle workplace conflict professionally. These conversations felt easy and authentic, like the kind of support system I had always hoped to have with a sister-in-law. Amanda's background was quite different from mine, which initially made our growing friendship feel even more meaningful. She had grown up in a family where money was always tight, and financial planning was more about surviving each month than building long-term security. Her parents had divorced when she was in high school, and both had struggled with debt and inconsistent employment in the years that followed. Amanda had learned to be self-reliant from a young age, working part-time jobs throughout high school and community college to help support herself and contribute to household expenses. This financial instability in Amanda's past had left her with some anxiety about money that I found completely understandable and wanted to help address. She would sometimes make comments about feeling behind her peers financially, or worry that she wasn't smart enough to understand complex financial concepts. I tried to reassure her that financial literacy was something anyone could learn with patience and practice, and I genuinely enjoyed sharing strategies and resources that had worked for me. Her gratitude for this guidance felt sincere and touching, making me feel valued in a way that was different from my other relationships. Our friendship deepened significantly when Amanda started joining me for regular activities around Phoenix. She became my hiking companion for weekend trips to South Mountain and Papago Park, and I loved having someone to share those beautiful Arizona mornings with. We would start early to beat the heat, pack plenty of water and healthy snacks, and spend hours talking about everything from career goals to travel dreams while enjoying some of the most gorgeous scenery in the Southwest. Amanda was in good shape from her years working in retail, and she never complained about the challenging trails or early morning start times. Shopping trips to the outlets in Anthem and the boutiques in Old Town Scottsdale became another regular, bonding activity for us. Amanda had a great eye for fashion and style, and she helped me update my professional wardrobe with pieces that were both appropriate for client meetings and reflective of my personal aesthetic. In return, I helped her find high-quality items that would last longer and provide better value than the fast fashion she had been buying out of habit. These shopping excursions often included lunch at one of our favorite restaurants, and I treasured those long conversations over salads and iced tea. The evenings Amanda spent at my apartment became some of my favorite times in our developing relationship. She would come over after work when Ryan was traveling for his construction projects, or when they had minor disagreements that she wanted to process with someone outside their relationship. We would cook dinner together, watch movies, or just sit on my balcony talking about life while enjoying the beautiful Phoenix sunsets. Amanda was an excellent listener who asked thoughtful questions and offered supportive perspectives without being judgmental or pushy. During these intimate conversations, Amanda shared details about her past relationships, her career aspirations, and her dreams for the future that helped me understand her on a deeper level. She talked about wanting to build the kind of stable, loving family that she hadn't experienced growing up. She expressed admiration for the close relationships in the Miller family and said she hoped to create something similar with Ryan. Her vulnerability during these conversations made me feel trusted and valued, and I found myself sharing my own hopes and fears more openly than I typically did with friends. Amanda's integration into our family traditions happened so naturally that it felt like she had always been part of our celebrations and gatherings. She joined us for the annual Miller family camping trip to Sedona, where she proved to be an enthusiastic hiker and a skilled camp cook. She came to my parents' house for holiday dinners, bringing thoughtfully chosen dishes that complemented Mom's menu perfectly. She remembered everyone's birthdays and anniversaries, often giving gifts that showed she had been paying attention to conversations about individual interests and preferences. The camping trip to Sedona was particularly special because it gave Amanda a chance to experience one of our family's most cherished traditions in a setting that showcased Arizona's natural beauty at its finest. She had never done much camping before, but she embraced the experience with enthusiasm and good humor. When our tent leaked during an unexpected rainstorm, she laughed about it rather than complaining. When Dad insisted on cooking breakfast over the campfire, even though it took twice as long as using the camp stove, she helped patiently and complimented his outdoor cooking skills. Amanda's genuine appreciation for our family dynamics was evident in the way she talked about our relationships and traditions. She would tell Ryan how lucky he was to have parents who were still happily married and siblings who actually enjoyed spending time together. She would comment on how refreshing it was to be around a family that could disagree about things without drama or lasting resentment. Her observations made me realize how special our family bonds really were, and feel even more grateful for the foundation my parents had created. The professional support Amanda provided during my apartment move was another significant moment in building our relationship. When my lease expired and I decided to upgrade to a slightly larger place with better amenities, Amanda volunteered to help coordinate the entire process. She took charge of organizing the packing timeline, researching moving companies, and even handling some of the utility transfers while I was dealing with a particularly demanding client project at work. Her assistance was invaluable during a stressful time, and I felt grateful to have someone I could rely on. Amanda's curiosity about my financial management system during the move felt natural and helpful rather than intrusive. She asked thoughtful questions about how I had researched different neighborhoods, what factors I had considered in choosing my new apartment complex, and how I had budgeted for moving expenses. When she offered to help me set up my home office, filing system in the new place, I appreciated having an extra pair of hands and someone who could learn from my organizational strategies. The Christmas celebration when Ryan proposed was magical in ways that went beyond just the engagement itself. Amanda had become such an integral part of our family that her joy felt like everyone's joy, and her excitement about planning a wedding was infectious. She immediately started talking about how she wanted the ceremony to reflect both her and Ryan's personalities, while also honoring the family traditions that had become important to her. Her vision for their wedding sounded beautiful and romantic, and I felt thrilled to be included in the early planning conversations. Amanda's approach to wedding planning in those first few weeks after the engagement seemed thoughtful and realistic. She talked about wanting to create a celebration that would be meaningful for their families and friends without being financially overwhelming. She mentioned being willing to make compromises on certain aspects of the wedding in order to prioritize the elements that were most important to her and Ryan. Her initial budget discussions seemed reasonable and well considered, which made me feel confident that she had learned valuable lessons from our conversations about financial planning. The bridal party selection process was another touching moment in our relationship. When Amanda asked me to be her maid of honor, I felt genuinely honored and excited about the responsibility. She explained that she wanted me in that role not just because I was Ryan's sister, but because I had become one of her closest friends and most trusted advisors. The other bridesmaids she chose were women from different periods of her life who each brought something special to her support system, and I looked forward to getting to know them better through the wedding planning process. Amanda's vulnerability about her lack of experience with formal event planning made me want to be as helpful as possible throughout the engagement period. She had never organized anything more complicated than a birthday party, and the prospect of coordinating vendors, timelines, and guest lists for a wedding felt overwhelming to her. I offered to share resources, help with research, and provide emotional support whenever she needed it. Her gratitude for this assistance felt genuine and touching, and I enjoyed the opportunity to be useful during such an important time in her life. The evolution of our relationship from cautious friendliness to genuine sisterly affection had happened so gradually and naturally that it felt like the most normal thing in the world. By the time Amanda got engaged to Ryan, I couldn't imagine our family without her. She had become the sister I had always wanted, the friend I could count on for both practical help and emotional support, and the person I looked forward to having in my life for decades to come. The trust we had built felt unshakable, and the future we were all planning together seemed bright and full of possibilities. The subtle changes in Amanda's behavior and questioning patterns began so gradually that I initially attributed them to natural curiosity and her desire to improve her financial situation. During our regular coffee dates in Old Town Scottsdale, her questions about my banking and credit management started becoming more specific and detailed. Instead of asking general questions about how to build good credit, she would inquire about which specific credit cards I used, what my credit limits were, and how often I checked my credit reports. At the time, these seemed like the natural progression of someone who was becoming more sophisticated about personal finance. Amanda's interest in my personal identification information also intensified during this period, though she always framed her questions in ways that seemed completely reasonable. She would ask about my social security number while we were discussing the process of applying for credit cards, saying she wanted to understand how the verification process worked. She would inquire about my mother's maiden name during conversations, about security questions, claiming she was trying to set up better password protection for her own accounts. These details were shared naturally during conversations that felt educational and supportive. The frequency of Amanda's visits to my apartment increased significantly after Ryan's proposal, and during these visits, she began showing more interest in my personal workspace and filing systems. She would compliment my organizational strategies and ask to see how I had arranged different types of documents. When I would show her my filing system for bank statements, tax records, and other important papers, she would take photos with her phone, saying she wanted to remember the setup when she organized her own files. Her enthusiasm for learning better, organizational skills seemed genuine and admirable. During the evenings when Amanda stayed over at my apartment, I began noticing that she would often volunteer to help with tasks that involved accessing my personal information or accounts. She would offer to help me pay bills online, saying she wanted to learn my system for staying on top of monthly expenses. She would suggest organizing my mail while I was cooking dinner or getting ready for bed, and I appreciated having the assistance during busy periods. Her helpfulness felt like a natural extension of our close relationship and her desire to contribute to our household when she was staying over. Amanda's behavior around my computer and electronic devices also started changing in ways that seemed minor, but were actually quite significant. She would ask to borrow my laptop more frequently, usually explaining that she needed to research wedding vendors or check her email accounts. During these sessions, she would often have the computer for longer periods than seemed necessary for simple tasks, and sometimes I would find browser windows open to sites I hadn't visited. When I would ask about unusual browsing history, she would explain that she had been researching financial topics or reading articles I had recommended. The questions Amanda asked about my employment and income became more detailed and persistent. During this period, she would inquire about my salary range at Phoenix Creative Studio, my freelance rates, and my overall annual income in ways that went beyond casual curiosity. She would frame these questions as wanting to understand earning potential in creative fields or comparing different career paths, but the level of detail she sought seemed excessive. She also began asking about my tax filing process, my deductions, and other aspects of my financial life that seemed unusually specific. Amanda's interest in my family history and personal background also intensified in ways that felt slightly unusual, but not necessarily concerning. She would ask detailed questions about my childhood, my educational background, and my family's history in Arizona. She seemed particularly interested in details that might be used for security questions or identity verification, such as the names of my elementary school, my first pet, and the street where I grew up. She would frame these conversations as wanting to understand my background better or comparing our different childhood experiences. The way Amanda handled my personal mail and packages when she was at my apartment began changing during this period, in subtle but noticeable ways. She would often collect my mail from the mailbox when she arrived, saying she wanted to be helpful while I was finishing work or preparing dinner. Sometimes I would find that she had sorted through the mail before I saw it, explaining that she had separated bills from advertisements to make things easier for me. While I appreciated the thoughtfulness, I occasionally noticed that envelopes seemed to have been opened or that important documents were not where I expected to find them. Amanda's behavior during our shopping trips and errands around Phoenix also started including more requests to see and handle my identification documents. When we would go to stores that required ID for returns or exchanges, she would often volunteer to handle the transaction for me, saying she wanted to save me time or help me carry other items. During these interactions, she would take longer than necessary to complete simple tasks, and I sometimes noticed her taking photos of receipts or documents with her phone, which she explained as helping her track her own spending or remember store policies. The conversations Amanda initiated about identity theft and fraud protection became more frequent and detailed during this period, though she always framed them as being concerned about protecting herself and wanting to learn from my security practices. She would ask about how I monitored my credit reports, what signs of identity theft I watched for, and how quickly problems were typically detected and resolved. She seemed particularly interested in understanding the timeline for discovering fraudulent activity and the process for disputing unauthorized charges. Amanda's questions about my banking relationships and account structures became increasingly sophisticated and specific. She would ask about which bank I used for checking versus savings, whether I had multiple accounts at different institutions, and how I managed online banking access. She seemed particularly interested in understanding my automatic bill payment, systems, my account passwords and security settings, and the process for adding authorized users to accounts. Her curiosity seemed to go beyond general financial education into areas that felt more invasive. The timing of Amanda's visits to my apartment began coinciding more frequently with periods when I was receiving important financial documents or dealing with banking transactions. She would often arrive on days when my credit card statements were being delivered, or when I was expecting tax documents or insurance paperwork. When I would mention these deliveries during our conversations, she would often volunteer to help me review and file the documents, saying she wanted to learn more about reading financial statements and organizing important papers. Amanda's behavior around my cell phone and personal devices also changed in ways that seemed minor, but were actually quite concerning. She would often ask to use my phone to make calls or send texts, explaining that her battery was dead or that she was having service problems. During these interactions, she would often have my phone for longer periods than seemed necessary, and sometimes I would notice that settings or applications had been changed. When I would ask about these changes, she would claim that she had accidentally touched something or that the phone had updated automatically. The way Amanda handled information about my work schedule and travel plans also became more systematic and detailed. She would ask specific questions about when I would be out of town for client meetings, how long I would be away from my apartment, and whether I was expecting any important deliveries or appointments during those periods. She seemed particularly interested in times when I would be completely unavailable or unreachable, and she would often volunteer to check on my apartment or collect my mail during these absences. Amanda's interactions with my family members also began including more questions about my personal history and identification information. She would ask my parents about stories from my childhood, details about my educational background, and information about our family's history in Arizona. She seemed particularly interested in gathering details that might be useful for answering security questions or completing identity verification processes. Her curiosity seemed natural given her integration into our family, but the level of detail she sought was actually quite unusual. The financial conversations Amanda initiated began focusing more heavily on topics related to credit applications, loan processes, and identity verification procedures. She would ask detailed questions about how credit card companies verified applicant information, what documentation was required for different types of accounts, and how quickly new accounts could be opened and activated. She seemed particularly interested in understanding the process for expediting credit applications and having cards delivered to addresses other than the applicant's primary residence. Looking back now, I can see that Amanda was systematically gathering all the information she would need to successfully steal my identity and open fraudulent accounts in my name. But at the time, each individual question or behavior seemed reasonable within the context of our close relationship and her stated desire to improve her financial literacy. The warning signs were there, but they were camouflaged so skillfully within normal sisterly interactions that I never suspected the true purpose behind her curiosity and helpfulness. The magical weekend in Flagstaff when Ryan proposed to Amanda marked the beginning of what should have been the happiest period of their relationship, but it also triggered a series of changes that would ultimately lead to the most devastating betrayal of my life. The proposal itself was everything Amanda had dreamed of: romantic, thoughtful, and perfectly planned to take advantage of Flagstaff's beautiful winter scenery. Ryan had arranged for them to stay at a charming bed and breakfast near downtown, and he had coordinated with the staff to have champagne and flowers waiting in their room when Amanda said yes to his carefully planned proposal during a snowy evening walk. Amanda's call to me from their hotel room that night was filled with such genuine joy and excitement that I found myself crying happy tears along with her. She could barely speak coherently between sobs of happiness, and when she finally managed to describe the proposal and show me her engagement ring over video chat, I felt overwhelmed with love for both of them. The ring was absolutely gorgeous, a classic solitaire setting with a beautiful diamond that caught the light perfectly, and it was clear that Ryan had put considerable thought and planning into choosing something that would reflect Amanda's style and preferences. The drive back to Phoenix the next day was apparently filled with nonstop wedding planning conversations, and by the time they returned to the valley, Amanda had already started making lists of vendors to research and venues to visit. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and during our first post-engagement coffee date, she showed me pages of notes about different aspects of the wedding she wanted to plan. Her vision was romantic and elegant, with touches that would honor both of their personalities and families while creating the kind of celebration they would remember forever. What struck me most about Amanda's approach to wedding planning in those first few weeks was how quickly she seemed to move from dreaming to actual decision-making. Within days of the engagement, she had already scheduled appointments to visit 3 different venues around the Phoenix area. She had researched photographers whose work she admired and had started reaching out to them about availability for her preferred wedding date. Her efficiency and organization impressed me, especially given that she had never planned an event of this magnitude before. The first venue tour Amanda scheduled was at Desert Ridge Country Club, one of the most prestigious wedding locations in Scottsdale. When she invited me to join her for the appointment, I was excited to be included in such an important decision, but I was also slightly concerned about the cost implications. Desert Ridge was known for hosting elaborate celebrations for Phoenix's wealthiest families, and their pricing reflected the luxury and exclusivity of the venue. When I gently mentioned this concern, Amanda reassured me that she wanted to explore all options before making decisions, and that she was confident about her ability to afford her dream wedding. The tour of Desert Ridge Country Club was absolutely breathtaking, and I could understand why Amanda fell in love with the venue immediately. The main ballroom was elegant and spacious, with floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the stunning desert landscape and perfectly manicured golf course. The bridal suite was luxurious and private, providing the perfect space for getting ready on the wedding day. The outdoor ceremony site was romantic and intimate, with beautiful mountain views that would create an unforgettable backdrop for their vows. During the appointment, the wedding coordinator at Desert Ridge explained their various package options and pricing structures, and I was shocked by how expensive even the most basic options were. The venue fee alone was more than many people spent on their entire weddings, and that didn't include any of the additional services like catering, flowers, or photography. When the coordinator quoted pricing that started at over $30,000 just for the venue and basic catering, I expected Amanda to express concern or ask about more affordable alternatives. Instead, Amanda seemed completely unfazed by the pricing information and actually began asking about upgrades and additional services that would increase the total cost even further. She inquired about premium bar packages, enhanced floral arrangements, and specialty lighting that would create a more dramatic atmosphere during the reception. Her enthusiasm for these expensive add-ons surprised me, and when I tried to catch her eye to gauge her reaction to the mounting costs, she seemed focused entirely on the possibilities rather than the financial implications. By the end of the appointment at Desert Ridge, Amanda had expressed serious interest in booking the venue for her preferred wedding date in late summer. She asked about the deposit requirements and payment timeline, and when the coordinator explained that they would need a significant deposit to hold the date, Amanda said she would need a few days to finalize the details, but was confident about moving forward. Her certainty about being able to afford such an expensive venue confused me, especially given what I knew about her income and savings situation. The drive home from Desert Ridge provided the first opportunity I had to express my concerns about Amanda's wedding budget and financial planning. I tried to approach the conversation delicately, acknowledging how beautiful the venue was while also pointing out that the costs were significantly higher than what we had discussed during her earlier budget planning sessions. I reminded her about the savings goals we had set and suggested that there might be other venues that could provide a similar level of elegance at a more manageable price point. Amanda's response to my budget concerns was unlike anything I had experienced in our previous financial planning conversations. Instead of being receptive to my input, or interested in discussing alternatives. She seemed defensive and dismissive of my suggestions. She insisted that she had the financial situation under control and that she had been saving more aggressively than I realized. When I asked for specific details about how she planned to afford the wedding expenses, she became vague and evasive, saying only that she had figured out a way to make it work. The change in Amanda's communication style when discussing wedding finances was dramatic and concerning. Throughout our friendship, she had always been open and collaborative when talking about money matters, frequently asking for my advice and seeming genuinely interested in learning from my experience. But now, when I tried to offer guidance about wedding budgeting or suggest cost-saving strategies, she would shut down the conversation or change the subject. Her previous gratitude for financial mentoring had been replaced by an attitude that suggested she no longer needed or wanted my input. Within a week of visiting Desert Ridge Country Club, Amanda had not only decided to book the venue, but had also scheduled appointments with several high-end wedding vendors whose services would complement the luxury setting. She had arranged to meet with a photographer whose wedding packages started at $8,000, a florist who specialized in elaborate centerpieces with imported flowers, and a caterer known for gourmet menus that cost well over $100 per person. Each of these vendor selections represented a significant financial commitment that seemed inconsistent with her previously stated budget goals. The speed with which Amanda was making these expensive commitments was alarming, but what concerned me even more was her apparent lack of anxiety about the financial implications. In all of our previous conversations about major purchases or financial decisions, Amanda had been careful and thoughtful, often asking multiple questions and seeking reassurance before moving forward. But now she seemed to be making decisions worth thousands of dollars with complete confidence and no apparent stress about how she would pay for everything. Amanda's explanation for her newfound financial confidence was frustratingly vague and inconsistent. When pressed for details about how she was planning to afford such an elaborate wedding, she would mention different sources of funding that didn't seem to add up to a coherent financial plan. Sometimes she would reference savings that she had accumulated through careful budgeting. Other times, she would hint at family money that she hadn't previously mentioned. And occasionally, she would suggest that her credit was now strong enough to handle the temporary debt associated with wedding expenses. The contradiction between Amanda's previous financial anxiety and her current spending confidence was so dramatic that I began to wonder if she was hiding significant financial resources that she hadn't shared during our budget planning sessions. It seemed possible that she had inherited money from a family member or received an unexpected windfall that she preferred to keep private. While I was hurt that she might not have trusted me with this information, I tried to respect her privacy and assume that she had legitimate reasons for her newfound financial freedom. The first major red flag that something was seriously wrong came when Amanda started receiving mail and packages at her apartment that seemed inconsistent with her stated income and spending patterns. During my visits to her place, I noticed credit card statements and financial documents from institutions I didn't recognize, as well as packages from expensive retailers and service providers. When I asked casually about these deliveries, Amanda would give vague explanations about promotional offers or business correspondence that didn't quite make sense. Amanda's behavior around financial documents and personal information also changed significantly during this period. She became more secretive about her mail and would often collect it quickly when I was visiting, explaining that she preferred to review financial information privately. She started keeping her laptop and phone closer to her during our conversations, and she seemed nervous when notifications would come in while we were together. Amanda's transformation from budget-conscious shopper to luxury spender accelerated dramatically in the weeks following her engagement, and nowhere was this more evident than in her approach to wedding dress shopping. When she invited me to join her for appointments at several bridal boutiques around Phoenix, I expected we would be looking at dresses in the reasonable price range we had discussed during our previous budget planning sessions. Instead, Amanda led me directly to Designer Bridal Boutique in Central Phoenix, one of the most expensive bridal shops in the valley, where wedding gowns started at over $3,000 and could easily cost more than $10,000 for designer pieces. The appointment at Designer Bridal Boutique was unlike any shopping experience I had ever witnessed. Amanda seemed completely comfortable browsing through gowns that cost more than most people's monthly salaries, and she showed particular interest in dresses from high-end designers whose names I recognized from fashion magazines. When the bridal consultant began pulling options for her to try on, Amanda gravitated toward the most elaborate and expensive pieces in the shop, including a stunning silk creation with hand-beaded lace that carried a price tag of nearly $8,000. Watching Amanda try on wedding dresses that cost more than some people's cars was surreal, but what disturbed me most was how natural and entitled she seemed to feel about considering such expensive options. There was no hesitation, no sticker shock, no discussion of whether these prices fit within her budget. She evaluated each dress purely on aesthetic and emotional criteria, asking questions about alterations and delivery timelines as if the cost was completely irrelevant. When I tried to subtly redirect her attention to more affordable options, she dismissed my suggestions without even looking at the dresses I pointed out. The most shocking moment of the bridal appointment came when Amanda fell in love with a designer gown that cost over $6,000 and immediately began discussing the purchase process with the consultant. She asked about payment options, delivery schedules, and alteration timelines with the confidence of someone who had unlimited financial resources. When the consultant explained that they would need a deposit of 50% to begin the alteration process, Amanda said she would need to check her calendar, but was confident about moving forward within the week. After leaving the bridal boutique, I felt compelled to have a serious conversation with Amanda about her wedding budget and spending decisions. I tried to approach the topic gently, expressing my concern that she might be taking on more financial stress than necessary, and suggesting that there were ways to have a beautiful wedding without spending amounts that could impact her financial security for years to come. I reminded her about the importance of starting married life without overwhelming debt, and pointed out that Ryan might not be comfortable with such extravagant wedding expenses. Amanda's reaction to my budget concerns was defensive and dismissive in a way that felt completely out of character for our relationship. She insisted that I was underestimating her financial situation and suggested that I was being overly conservative about wedding spending. She claimed that Ryan was fully supportive of her wedding vision and that they had discussed the financial implications thoroughly. When I pressed for more specific information about how she planned to afford these expenses, she became irritated and accused me of not trusting her judgment about her own financial capabilities. The conversation in the car after the bridal appointment was the first time in our relationship that Amanda had spoken to me with anything approaching hostility, and it left me feeling confused and hurt. The person sitting next to me seemed like a stranger who happened to look like the thoughtful, budget-conscious woman I had been mentoring for the past 2 years. Her dismissal of my concerns felt particularly painful because I had genuinely been trying to help her avoid financial mistakes that could impact her future happiness and security. Amanda's spending spree continued with appointments at Phoenix's most expensive wedding vendors, and each decision seemed more financially irresponsible than the last. She booked a photographer whose artistic portfolio was undeniably beautiful, but whose prices reflected his status as one of the most sought-after wedding photographers in Arizona. She chose a florist who specialized in elaborate arrangements with exotic flowers that were flown in from around the world. She selected a caterer whose gourmet menus included ingredients like imported truffles and premium seafood that would cost more per person than most people spent on a nice dinner out. The vendor selection process revealed another troubling aspect of Amanda's new approach to wedding planning. She seemed completely uninterested in comparing prices or negotiating better deals, which was totally inconsistent with the careful comparison shopping we had always done together in the past. When vendors would quote their prices, Amanda would accept them without question or discussion. She never asked about package deals, seasonal discounts, or alternative options that might provide similar results at lower costs. Her approach felt reckless and impulsive in ways that contradicted everything I thought I knew about her financial personality. The timeline Amanda established for making these major financial commitments was also concerning. She seemed to be operating under pressure to book vendors and make deposits as quickly as possible, even when there was no apparent reason for such urgency. Her wedding date was still many months away, and most vendors had availability for her preferred time slot. When I asked about her rush to finalize everything so quickly, she gave vague explanations about wanting to secure her first-choice vendors and not wanting to risk losing her preferred options. Amanda's communication with Ryan about the wedding expenses was another source of confusion and concern for me. During family dinners and casual conversations, Ryan seemed surprised by some of the vendor choices Amanda had made and the level of luxury she was planning for their celebration. He would make jokes about feeling underdressed for his own wedding or comment that Amanda's vision was more elaborate than anything he had imagined. While his tone was generally good-natured, I could detect underlying anxiety about the financial implications of Amanda's choices. The disconnect between Ryan's apparent surprise about the wedding costs and Amanda's claims that they had discussed everything thoroughly made me wonder who was telling the truth about their financial planning process. Either Amanda was making major spending decisions without fully consulting Ryan, or Ryan was being less than honest about his knowledge and approval of the wedding budget. Both possibilities were troubling and suggested that their communication about money was not as healthy as I had hoped it would be for their marriage. Amanda's behavior during family gatherings also changed noticeably during this period. She became more defensive about wedding-related topics and seemed irritated when anyone asked questions about her planning process or vendor choices. When my parents would make casual comments about wedding costs or suggest ways to save money, Amanda would respond with barely concealed frustration and insist that everything was under control. Her previous openness to advice and feedback was replaced by an attitude that suggested any input about her wedding was unwelcome interference. The financial stress Amanda claimed not to be experiencing seemed to manifest in other aspects of her behavior and lifestyle during this period. She appeared more tired than usual, often mentioning sleepless nights spent researching vendors or working on wedding planning details. She seemed more irritable and impatient during our conversations, particularly when the topics related to money or budgeting. Her usual cheerful and optimistic demeanor was frequently replaced by anxiety and defensiveness that felt uncharacteristic and concerning. Amanda's relationship with money in areas unrelated to the wedding also began changing in ways that suggested she had access to financial resources that hadn't been available to her before. She started shopping for clothes at more expensive stores, eating at upscale restaurants more frequently, and booking spa appointments for massages and facials that she had previously considered luxury splurges. When I would comment on these lifestyle upgrades, she would make vague references to bonuses at work or improved financial management that allowed her more discretionary spending. The contradiction between Amanda's previous financial anxiety and her current spending confidence became more apparent with each passing week. The woman who had once stressed about whether she could afford a $40 dinner at a nice restaurant was now casually booking wedding vendors that charged thousands of dollars for single services. The person who had been grateful for my help creating a budget that would allow her to save $50 per month was now making financial commitments that suggested she had access to tens of thousands of dollars in disposable income. Amanda's explanations for her financial transformation were inconsistent and unsatisfying every time I tried to understand what had changed in her situation. Sometimes she would claim that she had been saving more aggressively than I realized and had accumulated a substantial wedding fund over the past few years. Other times, she would hint at family financial support that she hadn't previously mentioned, suggesting that relatives were contributing to the wedding costs. Occasionally, she would reference her improved credit score and suggest that she was comfortable taking on some debt for such an important life event. The timing of Amanda's financial transformation was also suspicious in ways that I didn't fully recognize at the time. Her newfound spending ability seemed to coincide almost exactly with the period when she had been spending more time at my apartment and had greater access to my personal information and financial documents. While I noticed the correlation, I didn't make the connection between her increased presence in my personal space and her sudden ability to afford luxury vendors and services. The most troubling aspect of Amanda's wedding planning during this period was how isolated and secretive she became about the financial details of her decisions. In the past, she had been eager to share information about her financial life and had welcomed my input on major spending decisions. But now she was evasive about specific costs, defensive about her choices, and unwilling to discuss the practical implications of her wedding budget. This secrecy felt like a betrayal of the trust and openness that had defined our relationship up to that point. Amanda's transformation from grateful mentee to defensive and secretive bride was painful to witness and difficult to understand. The person I had thought I knew so well seemed to have been replaced by someone whose values and priorities were completely different from what I had observed over 2 years of close friendship. Her dismissal of my concerns and her resistance to financial advice felt particularly hurtful because I had genuinely believed that our relationship was built on mutual respect and trust. The engagement period that should have been a joyful time of celebration and anticipation for our entire family was becoming a source of stress and confusion instead. Amanda's behavior was creating tension not just between us, but within the broader family dynamic as everyone struggled to understand her dramatic personality change and increasingly secretive approach to wedding planning. What none of us realized was that Amanda's newfound confidence and spending ability was based on her systematic theft of my identity and her fraudulent use of my personal information to fund her elaborate wedding fantasy. The foundation had been laid for the devastating betrayal that was coming, but at the time, all I could see was the painful deterioration of a relationship that had meant everything to me. Amanda had gone from being the sister I had always wanted to being someone I barely recognized, and I had no idea that the worst was yet to come. The catalyst event of Ryan's proposal had triggered not just wedding planning, but the activation of a criminal scheme that would destroy my financial life and shatter my faith in family relationships forever. The subtle invasion of my privacy that Amanda orchestrated during our friendship had been so gradual and skillfully executed that I never recognized the systematic nature of her information gathering until it was far too late. What I had interpreted as natural curiosity and helpfulness was actually a carefully planned reconnaissance mission designed to collect every piece of personal data she would need to successfully steal my identity. The warning signs were all there, hidden in plain sight within our seemingly innocent sisterly interactions. But Amanda had been so strategic about camouflaging her true intentions that I never suspected the criminal enterprise she was building using my trust and generosity. Amanda's fascination with my daily routines and schedule had intensified significantly in the months leading up to Ryan's proposal, though she always framed her questions as caring concern for my well-being and success. She would ask detailed questions about my work schedule at Phoenix Creative Studio, wanting to know which days I typically worked late, when I traveled for client meetings, and how often I worked from home versus the office. She seemed particularly interested in understanding my weekend routines, my regular commitments like hiking or family dinners, and any upcoming vacation plans that would take me away from Phoenix for extended periods. The information Amanda gathered about my daily life went far beyond casual conversation and into territory that should have raised red flags about her intentions. She would ask specific questions about my morning routine, including what time I typically left for work and which route I usually took to the office. She seemed fascinated by my evening habits, wanting to know when I usually got home, how I spent my weeknights, and what time I typically went to bed. Her curiosity about these mundane details seemed excessive, even for someone who cared deeply about my life and well-being. Amanda's interest in my home security and access systems was another area where her questions became increasingly detailed and invasive over time. She would ask about my apartment complex's security features, including whether there were cameras in common areas, how package deliveries were handled, and what type of access control system was used for the building. She seemed particularly curious about my personal security habits, such as whether I always locked my door, how I handled spare keys, and whether I used any type of home security system or monitoring service. The way Amanda observed and cataloged information about my personal belongings and living space was systematic in ways that went far beyond normal curiosity about a friend's lifestyle. During her visits to my apartment, she would comment on and ask questions about items that contained personal information, such as my filing cabinet, my desk organization system, and the location where I kept important documents. She seemed to take mental notes about where I stored things like my passport, my birth certificate, and my tax records, always framing her interest as admiration for my organizational skills. Amanda's behavior around my mail and personal correspondence became increasingly intrusive as our relationship deepened, though she was skilled at making her interest seem helpful rather than suspicious. She would often arrive at my apartment just as mail was being delivered, volunteering to collect it from the mailbox as a way to be useful while I was busy with other tasks. During these interactions, she would often spend more time than necessary sorting through the mail, and I sometimes noticed her taking photos of envelopes or documents with her phone before handing them over to me. The questions Amanda asked about my banking and credit relationships became more sophisticated and targeted over time, moving beyond general financial education into areas that seemed designed to gather specific information about my accounts and procedures. She would ask detailed questions about which bank branches I typically used, whether I preferred online or in-person banking, and how I handled different types of financial transactions. She seemed particularly interested in understanding my credit monitoring habits, including which services I used to check my credit reports, and how frequently I reviewed my accounts for unauthorized activity. Amanda's curiosity about my family's financial history and background was another area where her questions became more invasive and detailed than normal conversation would warrant. She would ask specific questions about my parents' employment, history, their banking relationships, and their approach to financial planning and investment. She seemed particularly interested in details about our family's history in Arizona, including where my parents had lived before I was born, what schools they had attended, and how long our family had been established in the Phoenix area. This way Amanda gathered information about my personal relationships and social connections was also systematic in ways that suggested she was building a comprehensive profile of my life rather than simply getting to know me better. She would ask detailed questions about my friends from college, my professional network, and my relationships with extended family members. She seemed particularly interested in understanding who might have access to personal information about me, who I confided in about financial matters, and who might notice if unusual activity occurred in my accounts. Amanda's interest in my employment situation and professional relationships extended beyond casual conversation into areas that felt invasive and unnecessary for normal friendship development. She would ask specific questions about my salary and benefits package, my relationship with colleagues and supervisors, and my long-term career plans and goals. She seemed particularly fascinated by my freelance work and side projects, wanting to understand how I managed multiple income streams and whether anyone at Phoenix Creative Studio was aware of my outside consulting activities. The way Amanda observed and documented my technology usage and digital habits was another area where her behavior crossed the line from normal curiosity into suspicious surveillance territory. She would pay close attention to how I used my computer and phone, noting details about my passwords, my online banking procedures, and my social media habits. She seemed particularly interested in understanding which devices I used for different types of activities and whether I had automatic login settings that would allow easy access to my accounts. Amanda's questions about my medical and insurance information were framed as concern for my health and well-being, but they often included requests for specific details that seemed unnecessary for casual conversation. She would ask about my health insurance provider, my primary care physician, and any ongoing medical treatments or prescriptions I was managing. She seemed particularly interested in understanding how I handled medical billing and insurance claims, and whether I received medical correspondence at my home address or through online portals. The way Amanda handled my personal identification documents when we were together for various activities and errands was another area where her behavior became increasingly suspicious over time. During shopping trips, restaurant visits, or other activities that required showing ID, she would often volunteer to handle transactions for me, claiming she wanted to be helpful or save me time. During these interactions, she would often take longer than necessary to complete simple tasks, and I sometimes noticed her studying my driver's license or credit cards more carefully than seemed normal. Amanda's interest in my vehicle and transportation habits was another area where her questions became more detailed and invasive than casual conversation would warrant. She would ask specific questions about my car insurance, my registration and licensing procedures, and my typical driving routes around Phoenix. She seemed particularly interested in understanding my parking habits at work and home, whether my vehicle was visible from the street, and whether I had any distinctive features or modifications that would make my car easily identifiable. The information Amanda gathered about my shopping and spending habits went far beyond normal curiosity about my lifestyle and into territory that suggested she was building a comprehensive profile of my financial behavior. She would ask detailed questions about which stores I frequented, what types of purchases I typically made online versus in person, and how I managed returns and exchanges. She seemed particularly interested in understanding my payment preferences, whether I typically used cash, credit, or debit for different types of transactions. Amanda's behavior during family gatherings and social events also included systematic information gathering that went beyond normal conversation and relationship building. She would ask detailed questions about family history, childhood memories, and personal experiences that often included requests for specific dates, locations, and other details that could be useful for identity verification purposes. Her questions about family traditions, inside jokes, and shared experiences often seemed designed to gather information that might be used for security questions rather than simply bonding with our family. The way Amanda documented and stored information about our conversations and shared experiences was another warning sign that I failed to recognize at the time. She would often take notes during our discussions about financial topics, claiming she wanted to remember my advice and recommendations. She would frequently reference specific details from previous conversations in ways that suggested she was keeping detailed records of everything I shared with her about my personal and financial life. Amanda's interest in my future plans and goals extended beyond normal friendship curiosity into areas that seemed designed to understand my long-term availability and vulnerability to the scheme she was planning. She would ask detailed questions about my career aspirations, my travel plans, and my relationship goals in ways that seemed focused on understanding when I might be distracted or unavailable to monitor my financial accounts closely. Her questions about my timeline for major life changes like marriage, home buying, or career transitions seemed designed to identify periods when I might be less vigilant about financial monitoring. The most disturbing aspect of Amanda's information gathering campaign was how skillfully she had woven it into the fabric of our genuine friendship and family relationships. Every invasive question was embedded within conversations that felt natural and caring. Every violation of my privacy was disguised as helpfulness or sisterly concern. Every piece of personal information she extracted was obtained through interactions that strengthened rather than undermined my trust in her character and intentions. Looking back now, I can see that Amanda had spent nearly 2 years conducting a comprehensive intelligence operation designed to gather every piece of information she would need to successfully impersonate me for financial purposes. She had learned my social security number, my mother's maiden name, my employment history, my address history, my banking relationships, my spending patterns, and dozens of other details that would allow her to convincingly apply for credit in my name. She had studied my personal habits and routines so thoroughly that she knew exactly when and how to intercept mail, access accounts, and make purchases without being detected. The sophistication of Amanda's deception was breathtaking in its scope and execution. She had managed to position herself as one of the most trusted people in my life, while simultaneously conducting a systematic campaign to steal my identity and destroy my financial future. The betrayal was made even more devastating by the fact that every moment of apparent friendship and family bonding had actually been part of an elaborate criminal scheme designed to exploit my trust and generosity for her personal gain. The warning signs had been there all along, hidden within interactions that felt loving and supportive, but were actually calculated and predatory. Amanda had turned my own values against me, using my desire to help and mentor someone I cared about as the mechanism for gathering the information she needed to victimize me. The tragedy was not just the financial damage she would cause, but the way she had corrupted what I believed to be genuine family relationships and sisterly love into tools for criminal exploitation. The transformation in Amanda's spending behavior reached its peak when she began making vendor commitments that exceeded anything I could have imagined, even for someone with unlimited financial resources. The catering selection process alone revealed the true extent of her grandiose vision for the wedding celebration. Instead of choosing from the standard menu options that most couples considered, Amanda insisted on a completely customized culinary experience that would rival the most exclusive events in Scottsdale. She selected a catering company known for serving Phoenix's wealthiest families, with a reputation for incorporating ingredients like imported caviar, aged Wagyu beef, and rare, vintage wines into their wedding menus. The catering proposal that Amanda enthusiastically approved included a cocktail hour featuring premium spirits and handcrafted appetizers, a multi-course dinner with options for guests with various dietary restrictions, and a late-night snack service that would keep the celebration going into the early morning hours. Each element of the menu was designed to impress and indulge guests in ways that would make the wedding memorable for years to come. The total cost for catering alone exceeded $15,000, which was more than many couples spent on their entire wedding celebrations. Amanda's approach to floral arrangements was equally extravagant and financially irresponsible. She chose a florist who specialized in creating elaborate displays that incorporated exotic flowers flown in from around the world, including rare orchids from Thailand, peonies from Holland, and roses from Ecuador. Her vision for the ceremony and reception included massive centerpieces, intricate bridal bouquets, elaborate altar arrangements, and floral installations that would transform Desert Ridge Country Club into what she described as a botanical paradise. The floral proposal that Amanda commissioned included not just the traditional wedding flowers, but also decorative elements like flower petals for the aisle, hanging floral installations for the reception space, and even floral arrangements for the restrooms and cocktail areas. She requested premium linens, crystal candelabras, and gold-plated serving pieces that would complement the floral designs and create a cohesive luxury aesthetic throughout the venue. The total cost for flowers and decorative elements approached $8,000, which seemed astronomical for a single day's celebration. Amanda's selection of wedding photography and videography services continued the pattern of choosing the most expensive options available in the Phoenix market. She hired a photographer whose artistic portfolio included weddings for celebrities and prominent business leaders, and whose packages included not just traditional wedding photography, but also engagement sessions, bridal portraits, and extensive post-wedding editing and album creation. The photographer she chose was known for his dramatic artistic style and his ability to capture intimate moments in ways that felt both candid and cinematic. The photography package that Amanda selected included a second photographer for additional coverage, a videographer to create a professionally edited wedding film, and extensive rights to all images and footage for personal use and social media sharing. She also requested additional services like drone photography for aerial shots of the venue and surrounding desert landscape, and extended coverage that would document not just the wedding day itself, but also the rehearsal dinner and post-wedding brunch. The total cost for photography and videography services exceeded $12,000, representing another massive financial commitment that seemed completely disconnected from any reasonable budget. Amanda's approach to wedding entertainment and music was equally elaborate and expensive. Instead of hiring a simple DJ or small band like most couples, she decided to book a full orchestra for the ceremony and a popular cover band for the reception. The musical entertainment she selected was known for performing at high-end events throughout Arizona, and their reputation for creating unforgettable experiences came with pricing that reflected their exclusivity and talent. The entertainment package that Amanda commissioned included classical musicians for the ceremony, processional, and recessional, a string quartet for the cocktail hour, and a 10-piece band for the reception dancing. She also requested special lighting and sound equipment that would enhance the musical performances and create the perfect ambiance for each portion of the celebration. The total cost for entertainment alone approached $10,000, representing yet another luxury expense that seemed completely out of proportion to any reasonable wedding budget. The transportation arrangements that Amanda planned for the wedding day were another indication of her complete disconnect from financial reality. Instead of arranging simple transportation for the wedding party, she decided to hire a luxury transportation company that specialized in serving Phoenix's most affluent clients. Her vision included a vintage Rolls-Royce for her arrival at the ceremony, matching luxury vehicles for the bridesmaids, and a party bus for transporting out-of-town guests between the hotel and the venue. The transportation package that Amanda selected included not just the vehicles themselves, but also professional chauffeurs, decorative elements like ribbons and flowers for the cars, and refreshments for guests during transport. She even arranged for a helicopter to provide aerial transportation for her and Ryan from the ceremony to the reception, creating a dramatic entrance that would surprise and delight their guests. The total cost for transportation services exceeded $5,000, representing another unnecessary luxury that added significantly to the overall wedding budget. Amanda's approach to wedding accommodations for out-of-town guests was equally extravagant and financially irresponsible. Instead of simply providing a list of recommended hotels, she decided to block rooms at one of Scottsdale's most exclusive resorts, with the intention of covering the accommodation costs for her closest family members and friends. The resort she selected was known for its luxurious amenities, world-class spa services, and premium dining options that would allow wedding guests to experience the finest that Arizona had to offer. The accommodation arrangements that Amanda planned included not just hotel rooms, but also welcome bags filled with local artisan products, organized activities like golf tournaments and spa treatments, and group dining experiences at the resort's signature restaurants. She envisioned creating a weekend-long celebration that would give their families and friends an unforgettable vacation experience, in addition to attending the wedding itself. The total cost for guest accommodations and activities approached $20,000, representing another massive expense that seemed completely divorced from practical financial planning. Amanda's selection of wedding attire and beauty services continued the pattern of choosing the most expensive options available without any consideration of budget constraints. In addition to the designer wedding dress that cost over $6,000, she commissioned custom shoes, luxury undergarments, and jewelry that would complement her bridal look perfectly. She also arranged for professional hair and makeup services that would begin several hours before the ceremony and continue throughout the day to ensure she looked perfect for every photo opportunity. The beauty and attire package that Amanda assembled included not just her own wedding day services, but also professional styling for her bridesmaids, her mother, and Ryan's mother. She arranged for manicures, pedicures, and spa treatments for the entire wedding party in the days leading up to the ceremony, creating a pampered and relaxed atmosphere that would help everyone look and feel their best for the celebration. The total cost for beauty and attire services exceeded $4,000, representing yet another luxury expense that seemed completely unnecessary for creating a beautiful wedding. The wedding favors and gifts that Amanda planned for their guests were another area where her spending reached ridiculous proportions. Instead of choosing simple tokens of appreciation like most couples, she decided to create elaborate gift bags that would serve as meaningful mementos of their special day. Her vision included premium items like personalized crystal glasses, gourmet chocolates from local artisans, and custom candles with scents that represented different aspects of their relationship and their love for Arizona. The guest favor package that Amanda commissioned included not just the gifts themselves, but also luxury packaging, personalized notes, and coordinated delivery to each guest's hotel room. She even arranged for larger gifts to be sent to the homes of their closest family members and friends, including items like custom photo albums, engraved serving pieces, and gift certificates to high-end restaurants and spas throughout Phoenix. The total cost for guest favors and gifts approached $3,000, representing another completely unnecessary expense that added to the mounting wedding budget. Amanda's approach to wedding insurance and contingency planning was the final area where her spending reached levels that seemed completely divorced from financial reality. Instead of purchasing basic wedding insurance to protect against vendor cancellations or weather issues, she decided to create an elaborate backup plan that would ensure their celebration could proceed flawlessly, regardless of any unforeseen circumstances that might arise. The contingency planning that Amanda arranged included backup vendors for every service, alternative indoor locations in case of extreme weather, and even a complete duplicate set of flowers and decorations that could be deployed if anything happened to the original arrangements. She hired a professional wedding coordinator to manage all of these details and ensure that every aspect of the celebration would proceed according to her exact specifications. The total cost for insurance and contingency planning exceeded $2,000, representing the final piece of a wedding budget that had grown to over $75,000. The cumulative effect of all these luxury choices was a wedding celebration that would rival anything featured in the most exclusive bridal magazines, but at a cost that seemed completely impossible given Amanda's stated financial resources and employment situation. When I attempted to calculate the total expenses she had committed to, the numbers were so staggering that I wondered if I had misunderstood something fundamental about her financial situation or her family's ability to contribute to the wedding costs. Amanda's reaction to my attempts to discuss the financial implications of her wedding choices became increasingly hostile and defensive as the planning process continued. When I would try to suggest more affordable alternatives or point out that she seemed to be spending far beyond any reasonable budget, she would shut down the conversation and accuse me of being unsupportive of her happiness. Her previous gratitude for financial mentoring had been completely replaced by resentment toward anyone who questioned her spending decisions or suggested that she might be taking on too much financial risk. The secrecy that surrounded Amanda's actual payment methods for these wedding expenses was another troubling aspect of her behavior during this period. When vendors would request deposits or final payments, Amanda would handle all financial transactions privately, never allowing me or anyone else in the family to see the credit cards or payment method she was using. She claimed that she preferred to keep financial matters private, but her secrecy felt excessive and suspicious given the magnitude of the expenses she was incurring. The timeline for Amanda's wedding planning was also concerning because she seemed to be operating under pressure to finalize and pay for everything as quickly as possible. Most couples take months to research vendors and compare options before making major financial commitments, but Amanda was booking services and making deposits within days of initial consultations. Her urgency to lock in vendors and pay deposits seemed driven by something beyond normal wedding planning enthusiasm, though I couldn't understand what was motivating her rush to commit to such expensive choices. The final red flag that something was seriously wrong came when Amanda began receiving an unusual volume of mail and packages at her apartment, including items that appeared to be financial documents and credit-related correspondence. When I would visit her place, I noticed stacks of unopened envelopes from banks and financial institutions that I didn't recognize, as well as packages from luxury retailers and service providers that seemed inconsistent with her stated income and spending capacity. Amanda's explanation for this increased correspondence was vague and unconvincing, typically involving references to promotional materials or business communications that didn't quite make sense. When I would ask directly about specific pieces of mail or packages I had noticed, she would become evasive and defensive, claiming that her financial affairs were private matters that she preferred not to discuss in detail. Her secrecy about these communications felt particularly troubling given our previously open relationship and her past willingness to share details about her financial life. The cumulative effect of all these warning signs should have alerted me to the possibility that something criminal was happening, but Amanda had been so skillful in her deception that I never made the connection between her suspicious behavior and my own financial vulnerability. The trust she had built over 2 years of friendship made it impossible for me to imagine that she was capable of the devastating betrayal that was already underway. I was completely unprepared for the discovery that would soon shatter my financial security and destroy my faith in family relationships forever. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.